Thank you very much indeed. Now, imagine a street where there are no curbs, no traffic signs, no crossings, cars, vans, pedestrians, cyclists all mingling together using the same space. Put baldly like that, it sounds extraordinary, but these shared spaces are being tried out in many parts of Britain. And the idea is that if we're all in the same space, then we have to take more care. And there's evidence it works. Accident rates falling in some areas. Not everyone's convinced, though. I've been to see one for myself in Kensington in central London to hear what people think there.
It gets a bit confusing sometimes to know when you're in the middle of the road and when you're not. There's no distinction between the actual road and the pavement. You can find yourself crossing in places where something's about to come and drive.
It's supposed to be more attractive, you know, and less hassled. Do you think that?
I think it looks cool, it's different. There's a couple of obvious problems. For example, like the parking spaces there, you don't actually know when you're standing in the middle of a parking space.
Right.
Which is a bit inconvenient.
It's not safe. I mean, that's my first instinct. This road I always feel unsafe walking up and down this road personally.
Do you?
Yeah, I do.
Right. Are you from the States?
Yeah, we're all Americans actually.
Well, do they have them there?
We don't have roads like this, no. Like, unless there's a sidewalk, you're not at all allowed to walk on the road.
What about your friends?
No, I don't feel safe either. I think they need like a slow down sign or something, because I can barely cross the street without fearing for my life. Like, I've almost been ran over a couple times, to be honest.
We're just wondering, as a driver, what you think of this idea of shared space.
Rubbish.
Why?
Well, because the pedestrians don't think that cars should be here, so they just walk out willy-nilly. It's not absolutely clear that it's two-way, so you get people careering up the wrong side of the road. So it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's dangerous.
Dangerous for you as well as the pedestrians?
Everybody. It looks very pretty, but in actual fact, it's an accident waiting to happen.
Now, there's a man here dressed as Father Christmas. Just wondering what you think of this idea of shared space that you've got here.
On principle, it's a great idea, but in practice, it does seem a little bit dangerous to me, especially when people are driving slow. I've noticed a couple of people texting on mobile phones. The problem is they're not really paying attention because they're going slow, which can cause an even bigger hazard.
So I wonder what the attitude is from a business point of view. I'm in a little area here where we've got a bookshop and just outside the Medici Gallery. Let's just go in and see what we can find out about their attitude. So this is a kind of gallery, you sell cards. I'm just wondering, from a business point of view, what you feel about this whole shared space idea and the changes that have been made.
I think that's been fairly successful. There's a lot more restaurants open at night, you know, so they're flooding out into the pavements at night, and it's become a destination to stay of an evening to eat out here, you see.
So footfall has been better, has it?
Definitely better, yes, I would say so, definitely.
Just some views from a shared space in central London. Well, Lord Holmes of Richmond, Chris Holm, the Paralympic athlete, organised a conference about this at Westminster this week. He thinks they're dangerous and he's called for new shared spaces to be put on hold. Ben Hamilton-Bailey is one of the leading designers of shared spaces in the UK. Let me go to you first, Ben. Do you feel a bit bruised sometimes when your baby gets a mauling like we heard there? Business liked it. Most of the people I talked to out in the street weren't so sure.
Well, streets are always difficult places, and it's always hard to know what is best for such streets. But I just want to correct a couple of things in your piece, that having no curbs is not necessarily synonymous with shared space. Most such spaces and streets have curbs.
But that one in
so
Exhibition Road, where I was, which you helped design, it didn't have.
Yeah,
no.
That's right.
No.
That's right. It has other devices.
And that's one of the problems about talking about this, isn't it? Is that every shared space seems to have its own special design characteristics.
Of course, yes, and it suits the particular context, which is what it's about. But the key issue is whether we can influence traffic speeds and bring down such speeds.
Right. And that's interesting because that is supposed to be 20 miles an hour. Those Americans seem to think people were going faster than that.
Well, yes, but there are schemes where clearly we've been successful in bringing speeds down.
Right.
and doing so by making drivers more aware and more responsive to their environment.
Let me bring in Chris Holmes, Lord Holmes. You're blind, and it's those with visual impairments who've been most critical about shared space, isn't it? So what are your views about what the problems are?
I think what I wanted to do with the report I launched in the summer was demonstrate that though shared space is a massive problem for blind and visually impaired people, it's actually a problem for all users, be you a cyclist, pedestrian, motorist, bus drivers. Everybody who responds to the survey had an overwhelmingly negative experience of shared space, and 35% of people said they actively avoided it. But to go to Ben's point, I think that's a really key point. Everybody would like to see reduced traffic speeds. That's a fine objective to aim at. I don't think it's in any sense acceptable to use pedestrians, toddlers, parents as unconsenting human shields for that objective.
But Chris, do you have the evidence that it is more dangerous? I mean, there are figures, for example, in Ashford, which I know is another one that Ben was involved in, where the figures of accidents and collisions have gone down since their scheme was introduced.
What my report indicated was there's significant underreporting of accidents in these spaces. So it's impossible to say that where shared space has been installed that it is safer. We need a central register of accidents. Big problems occur on these so-called
Presumably they were underreported before, though. Do you have any real evidence that they're not, as the figures suggest?
Well, I think that's precisely the point, Peter. It's impossible to say that shared space is safer. There could well be a large number of unreported accidents as a result of being more minor accidents with people who collide in shared space. But what we need, absolutely, is more evidence, more research on this, so these stories can be told. There's massive problems around the so-called courtesy crossings where there's no right-of-way for either user on those courtesy crossings. I think absolutely they need to be properly defined so we can have proper research and evidence on what's actually happening on that specific element of shared space.
So, Ben, what's the future of this idea?
Just to be clear, there is, I'm afraid, irrefutable evidence of significant drops in accidents in places like Poynton and Preston, where major shared spaces have been introduced.
But some people are avoiding. I mean, what blind people say,
that doesn't appear to be. Again, the evidence is that in connection to your previous piece about high streets, a vast improvement in the footfall and numbers of people in Poynton High Street, for example. So there are clearly. I entirely agree with Lord Holmes that some more research and understanding of how this works and what could make it better would be extremely useful, and if we could get some more support for such, that would be great.
Let me ask you this both very, very briefly. You had the summit, that's what this was supposed to do. Ben, what came out of that for you?
Well, I think I wasn't able to be there, but the important conclusion was that the more we can learn about how to keep reducing speeds, keeping driver care and awareness in high streets and busy spaces will be useful.
Chris Holmes.
What was clear from the summit was if you have inclusive design at the outset of these projects, you'll be able to design things that work for everybody. Unfortunately, that's seldom the case, and councils find themselves on the back of expensive retrofits, having to put traffic signals back in. Indeed, on many schemes up and down the country, all I want is for councils to be able to spend their money wisely on schemes that work for all. Inclusion at the heart.
Lord Holmes, Ben Hamilton-Bailey, thank you both very much indeed. I don't think that's the last we will have heard of this issue. Now, we're far less likely to